Hello. Welcome to, let me do that. Welcome to Bible Story Children's Time. And today is Monday, so it's the first day of the week. Welcome to a new week. We'll be plugging through the New Testament here, the Gospels, and hopefully we'll find some interesting stories for you. So today, we're going to stay in the book of Luke, or the Gospel of Luke, for another day or two, at least. And we're following more or less right along as it was written. The last stories we had, if you remember last week, Jesus preached in the synagogue and got himself thrown out. And then he was out in the other surrounding towns preaching, and he began casting demons out of people and healing them from whatever afflictions were affecting them that they saw, at least, as being possessed by demons. So now Jesus, his ministry is starting to roll along. He's got some street cred. He's got people who know who he is, people who, because of these other things that he's doing, the healings, they decide that he must be somebody important. He must be a prophet. So they're listening to him. They're paying attention. So, one day, as Luke tells it, Jesus is standing by the shores of Lake Gennesaret. Now, Gennesaret is what we call Sea of Galilee. This is just another term for it. So Jesus is by the shores of the Sea of Galilee, which of course is right by the province of Galilee where he's been teaching. And it's a place that is heavily involved in fishing. That's the main industry there. And he's finding that people are starting to crowd around him. And they want to get close, and they want to hear what he's preaching. But the closer they get, the more confining it is for him, and the harder it is for other people to hear. If you can imagine, remember, these are the days when there was no sound amplification. There was no megaphone to grab or anything like that. So it was all natural. And when you have a knot of people surrounding somebody who's talking, it's very hard for other people to hear them. Particularly when somebody is sitting and talking and preaching. And back in those days, first century of this era, teachers traditionally sat. It's not like today where they lecture, they walk around. Pastors typically will stand behind a pulpit. No, they sat. That was a position of respect. So if somebody's sitting in a chair or sitting on something and people are gathered around, you can't really see him, his voice doesn't really carry. So Jesus recognized this as a problem. So he happened to look, and there, close by, at the water's edge, were two boats. They would have been fishing boats. And they were left there by their crews, fishermen, who had just come in from a shift, a night or a day perhaps of fishing, and they were cleaning their nets. Now, this was something fishermen had to do because when they fished by using nets. It wasn't, the rod and reel stuff that we see today. They would take a big net. It would be about as big as this room. maybe even a little bigger. A net might be 15 feet in diameter. And they take that net and they cast it out into the lake, into the sea. And there were sinkers around most of it. And edges would sink down, and they would start to kind of go around whatever fish were there. And then after it had gone down and hopefully caught some fish, the fishermen would start hauling the net into the boat. And then hopefully you'd have a whole bunch of good fish in there that you could take back and eat and sell. This is how they made their money. But you bring the net in the boat, you dump out the fish, and then you cast the net again. Now, one of the drawbacks of doing it this way is you tended to catch stuff other than fish. There would be fish that you didn't want, that were not edible. Or you might have other mollusks and things like that, or just the various types of debris that are floating in, a freshwater sea. So by the time they got to shore, their nets would have all this gunk in them, this debris, this stuff you didn't want. So part of what happened is after you got back to shore, you got the fish taken out of your boat so they could be sold. Because you had to then spend time washing the net, cleaning the net, getting all the gunk out. And then if it was torn anywhere, you had to mend the net. So just getting back to shore with your load of fish wasn't the end of your day. There was much more to be done. So, Jesus sees these fishing boats. And he goes up to one of the boats, he gets in it. And this happened to be the boat belonging to Simon, or Simon Peter. And Jesus asked him to just put out a little from shore. Peter, or Simon, agreed to do this. So he obviously knew Jesus somewhat. We know that because Jesus also healed his mother-in-law. So there's already a relationship there. So Simon does what Jesus asks. He pushes the boat out into the water, just a little ways, so that people are no longer crowding around Jesus, and instead he's in a position where he's facing the crowd. And there are actually, as I've read, there are places along the Sea of Galilee that are kind of naturally formed for good acoustics, so that a voice is amplified naturally. So either it's in one of those spots, or it's just because Jesus is facing the crowd now. Nobody's, standing in front of him. His voice can carry over the water. He starts to preach, and the people listen. Eventually, he finishes preaching. Then he turns to Simon. And at this point, Simon is no doubt thinking, all right, Jesus is going to say, let's put back to shore, and maybe I can finish what I was doing, and then we can all go home. But no. Jesus looks at Simon and says, hey, Simon, I want you to take this boat and put out into deep water. I want you to go away from shore where it's shallow, go out into the deep, and then cast your nets for fish. Simon heard this request, and then he said, dude, we have been working all night. We've been fishing, we came in, we've been fixing the nets, and I'll tell you, we've had no luck. We're not going to catch anything. Especially not now during the day. It's hot. See, when it's hot, the fish tend to go out and they go deep, so they're harder to catch. So Simon says, we've already done this. It didn't work. We went back to shore. We've been working real hard. And then he looks at Jesus, just looking at him like, hey, I did ask you to do something, right? And Simon says, fine. We'll go out just to keep you happy. We'll go out and I'll cast the net. So the boat pushes out from shore. Either they have a sail, either it catches a little bit of wind that takes it out away from shore, or Peter and his brother Andrew row maybe and push the boat out from alongside the shoreline. And when they get out to deep water, Peter hesitates and Jesus just looks at him. Right? What are you going to do? So Peter takes a deep breath, he grabs the net, casts it out into the lake. And all of a sudden, as the net starts to sink down, the water is bubbling. It's churning around. It's obvious there's something in there. And the more he watches, the more obvious it becomes that there's a lot of something in there. And when the net isn't sinking anymore, Peter starts to haul it in. He gets his brother to help him. Together, they're hauling this net in. And it's so heavy. It is so heavy with fish that they can't do it themselves. The net starts to break. So they call for their partners on shore. The other boat that was there, the second boat Jesus saw, that was their partners. And they call to them and say, hey guys, get out here, fast. And the second boat comes alongside. And between them, they're able to get the nets up and out of the water. And there is such an abundance of fish. Now it's going into both boats. They are. There's such an abundance of fish that both boats start to sink lower and lower and lower in the water until they're in danger of being swamped. Now, just to give you a visual idea of what this means, if you're sitting there, you're thinking, a fishing boat, that's a nice, kind of a giant rowboat type thing, maybe, something like that. Back about 35 years ago, two brothers in a kibbutz, which is like a communal farm in Israel, in Galilee, they happened to see that because of a drought, the Sea of Galilee was shrinking at that time, and they happened to see, buried in the clay, under the lake, under the sea, they saw this. This is a 1st century fishing boat. It's been carbon dated as being about 2,000 years old. So it is right from the time of Jesus. It's even called the Jesus boat, even though there's absolutely no reason to connect it with Jesus other than the fact that it's from the right time frame. There's no JC carved in the seat or anything. But this boat was buried in the clay, and it's almost, for something 2,000 years old, for wood 2,000 years old, that's pretty well preserved. So they have a really good idea of what those boats were like. And this was no tiny thing. It was, or is, 27 feet long. And it's about 8.5 feet across. So it's a big boat. It's only 4 feet deep. So it's a broad bottom. And that helps you visualize what was going on there. Because there were enough fish being hauled into this boat and the other one like it, that they were almost going to sink. That's a bunch of fish. They didn't sink. Keep the story short. They didn't sink. They did eventually limp back to shore. And as they looked at all of these fish coming from this place where they had been, and there hadn't been fish there before, and now Jesus tells them to go there, and all of a sudden they're, literally up to their waist in fish. Simon looks at what they've brought in, and he falls at Jesus' feet, and he says, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." And this was something that was common, a common sentiment in the Bible, because when somebody's in the presence of God and they know it, all of a sudden they start to feel really guilty about how unworthy they are. So sometimes the natural reaction is to say, "You know what, just get away from me. I don't deserve it. I don't really want to be involved. I'm not worthy." And Jesus wouldn't leave him alone. In fact, Jesus says to Simon, "You don't have to be afraid. From now on, I'm going to make you fishers of men." And that is how he recruited his first disciples. Peter, his brother, Andrew, and James and John. The first disciples. So tomorrow, we're going to look at what these disciples began to accomplish and what they began to learn as they toured the area with Jesus, listening to his preaching. But in the meantime, I want you to remember that Peter, Simon, was a common man. His partners were common people. But Jesus called them to serve. So any of us, all of us, can be called to serve as well. So have a great evening. Stay safe. And we'll see you here tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Have a great evening.